Hey guys, what's up? So today we're going to look at the EVH 5150 Stealth 50 watt model, and we're going to see if we can hear any difference between the factory set cold bias versus what the tubes should be biased at based on spec. So stay tuned. So when you buy one of these amps, they come set cold, meaning that the voltage that's running through the power amp tubes is set at a low rate, so basically you don't have accidental damage to the tubes. The tubes have more longevity. The company just wants to make sure that, nothing bad happens within the first, 30 to 60 days of you guys having the amp. Well, what that means is they cold bias the tubes, so the sound that you get from the power amp section of these amps is a little less, oomphy, or maybe even a little less saturated, or they don't push the speakers quite as hard as they would if you were to turn up the voltage. So what this means for the 50 watt model is two 6L6 power tubes. When you get it from the factory, it's set at 45 millivolts when you plug in your multimeter to the back of the amp. Now the Stealth is unique in that it comes with a port on the back of the amp that allows you to read the bias, and also a really small screw adjustment to turn either clockwise or counterclockwise to adjust the voltage. And that's really cool. That's one of the mods that, Eddie himself wanted on this amp because he liked to be able to adjust the bias on the amp based on whatever setting he was at, because there's a lot of factors that go into what happens when you plug an amp into the wall and what kind of things are going on inside the amp with voltage. So what that means is 45 millivolts reading on the back of this amp is only about 75% of the actual spec'd voltage that's supposed to be going through the tubes, which is closer to 60. So in this test, what I want to do is I have this particular amp right now set to the 45 that the factory set it at. And then I'm going to turn up the voltage closer to the 60 millivolts that it's spec'd at, and we're going to listen to see if the differences are, one, audible, two, really significant, and three, if in the room I notice anything regarding kind of how they push the speakers, because I don't think we'll quite capture that aspect of it just from the mic up alone. So to set this up, I have the EVH running at 8 ohms into my Mesa 4x12 cab, which is mic'd up with an SM57. These are running, the original Vintage 30 speakers in the cabinet itself. And then I also have a room mic, just a condenser mic, kind of set about 6 feet away from the cab to try to capture any kind of ambient room sounds. Granted, I'm in a garage, so it might not be the best sounding, but if there's any audible or real difference in the two different kind of biases, hopefully we can capture that in the room mic. Furthermore, I'm going to be playing clips through the green channel, the blue channel, and the red channel, all kind of set up at noon on the EQs, only with the volume set up to be, not clipping my interface. And we're going to hear it, no boost pedals, just straight up raw amp sounds. And to kind of diversify this test a little bit more, and to kind of snuff out some of the naysayers who might nitpick things like pickup choice, active, passive, guitar, whatever, I'm going to play this Epiphone Les Paul Junior Special with the P90s, to give you kind of a passive single coil, hot rodded single coil sound. Something that's a little bit more natural, I guess, sounding. I don't know. People really kind of harp on the passive versus active things, and these are really cool sounding pickups, a really cool sounding guitar, and I think this will capture that flavor pretty well. And then additionally, we'll go over to this Jackson Dinky here that I installed these Fishman Fluence monitors in, and we'll play some clips through this too, and we'll see, kind of how that sounds. And I'm going to set this up to where you're hearing it back to back with the clean tones on this guitar at, 45 millivolts, the clean tones on this guitar at 60 millivolts, the clean tones on this guitar, etc., etc. So it should be a pretty interesting back-to-back comparison. And honestly, my expectations of what I'm going to hear, I don't think they're going to be as audible or as significant as one might think. and I definitely don't think they would be something that you'd be able to pick out in a mix. But I could be wrong. If I am, then that'll be interesting. So let's go ahead and move on to the sound clips and see what we get. Okay, so we just listened to the clips, and I gotta say, there's way more differences than what I expected. Now, if I didn't know any better, I wouldn't be able to tell you, oh my god, that's a cold bias amp. But when you listen to them back to back, that 60 millivolts definitely gives you a bit more saturation and a bit more presence and even some, I don't know, like girth to the overall tone that you're getting out of the speaker. I can tell you that in the room, the low end and some of the vibration coming out of the speaker when I was hitting some of those palm mutes was way more present. Like I just felt it more. Now, I listened back to some of the room mic audio. It's not great. This is an untreated garage, so there's like some weird vibrations and some buzzing going on. But you can actually hear some of the shifts in tone in the room too on the room mic. And what I was noticing listening back to that audio, you just, you go to 60 millivolts and all of a sudden there's like a presence and a bit more of a, of a crunch, especially on the blue channel. And some of those open chord clean tones, the shift from 45 to 60 is noticeable on the audio. So let's listen to a couple selected clips from the room mic audio, and then we'll talk about those. So the room mic audio definitely picked up a bit more of that mid-range kind of presence that kind of came through a bit more on the 60 millivolt setting for the bias. What we heard was a mix of, the Epiphone and the Jackson. We had some of those clean open chords. We had that blue channel kind of open chord rock riff. Both of those were very noticeably different from 45 to 60 millivolts. When you got into like the really more high gain stuff, you could definitely tell that there was something going on with some of those kind of chunkier palm mute parts on the 60 millivolts that just had a bit more bite to them. When you get this amp from the factory at 45 and you feel like it might be a little bit lackluster or it's just missing something, maybe go ahead and adjust that bias setting in the back towards, the spec'd 60 millivolts. And really, I only got it up to about 59. It fluctuates, and as you play, you'll notice that the multimeter will shift around as you're driving the power amp more. The consensus online seems to be as long as you're somewhere between that 57 and 59 millivolt range, you're doing pretty good. And I do think it makes a marked improvement on the tone of the amp, especially for high gain applications. So if you have one of these Stealths, do yourself a favor, get a multimeter, read the bias, do the adjustment. If you're really kind of wary about doing it yourself, you can take it to a tech, and yeah, you'll just have a better amp in my opinion. So thanks for watching. If you have any comments, suggestions, or just want to talk nonsense in the comments, go ahead. See you later.